Live from Orlando, Florida, you're now listening to the OZone Podcast, the voice of Orlando Magic fans. Join us every week for a unique fan perspective on all of the latest Magic news and updates. The show starts now.
All right. 3, 2, 1.
What's up, Magic fans? Welcome back to another episode of the OZone Podcast, brought to you by DraftKings and part of the Basketball Podcast Network. We are your hosts, Al, myself, Anthony. Today is Friday, August 19th, and in today's episode, we are joined by Orlando Magic HQ writer, Kieran. What's up, gentlemen?
What's up? How are we doing?
Good. In today's episode, we're finally going to get a chance to talk about the what I feel is a little touchy subject that's going on in the Magic universe and the rumors, not necessarily rumors, but the idea of the Magic potentially or not potentially going after Jordan Poole in free agency. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a few. The Orlando Magic new schedule for this upcoming season has been released. We'll talk about that. But before we do, I have a question for both of you before we talk about the Orlando Magic. Obviously, there's no secret around the controversy of Kevin Durant and the Brooklyn Nets about him really trying to force his way out of Brooklyn right after signing a massive contract extension. So my question to the both of you is, do the players have way too much power when it comes to their contracts and being able to move teams whenever they please? And Kieran, I'll give that to you first.
I don't know about too much power. I think it's becoming an issue of like they're just trying to hold leverage. It's really like very situation dependent because when you look at the Ben Simmons issue, like he didn't have a lot of leverage until the very end when they realized that Harden also wanted out of Brooklyn. Most of the time he was just sitting on the bench and he didn't get a lot of exposure to what he really wanted was to be actively shopped. He didn't want to be in Philly anymore. But with the KD thing, it's like I don't necessarily think it's too much power. I just think it's players are getting a little too trigger happy when it comes to quitting on their teams. Like KD never really gave that Brooklyn team a fair chance to be fully healthy. They even went to I think it was the Eastern Conference Finals with Milwaukee.
Yep.
And
semifinals.
And they still put up a pretty good fight. And I don't think that he really gave them a fair chance. And he kind of reaps what he sows. That was the team that he really wanted. He made a lot of moves to build the correct team around him. He asked for Nash. He did all this with Harden and to get Kyrie to sign there, 2 max spots and all that. But and it kind of blew up in his face. And now I don't necessarily think that he's in the wrong, but I think out of all the people involved, he should probably be the one to pay for it instead of the whole Brooklyn Nets as an organization, because this could set him back a while. If you don't have a top 5 player wanting to be on your team, who is going to want to be on your team? So it's looking scary for Brooklyn, but I wouldn't necessarily say I have too much power. I just think it's very situation dependent.
It's weird because I feel like Brooklyn, they've had issues ever since they moved to Brooklyn, from Darren Williams and Joe Johnson to them transitioning to Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce and just getting completely fleeced in that Boston deal, and then finally turning things around and getting Kevin Durant and Kyrie, and them kind of forcing the Knicks to look more poverty, or being the poverty franchise in terms of basketball in the Mecca. And I feel like they can't catch a break, and I feel bad. A part of me does really feel bad because in New York, there are obviously the Clippers of New York, and you take a look at California, Clippers, LA. Even if you want to even throw the Magic in there, it's no secret Miami gets the favoritism over the Orlando Magic. So a part of me does kind of feel bad. At the same time, it's kind of like Kevin Durant got everything that he asked for, from the head coach to the players to the contract. They got to play in New York. Like, you literally got everything that you wanted, and now it's kind of like, I don't have trust in the front office. So it's either them or it's me. You guys decide. And it's like, you asked for this. The one thing that all these, high elite caliber players that they want is they want to be able to make decisions. But then when they make decisions, when it comes to front office decisions or personnel decisions, and it doesn't work out, nobody wants to take responsibility for it. Not LeBron, not Kevin Durant. Nobody wants to take responsibility for it. They're quick to point the finger. And the easiest thing for Kevin Durant to do is say, hey, I want to be out. And what's the worst is that these players know the system. And the agents, they're the ones that kind of prepare their players as well, because they're saying, listen, take the money now. And if you want to leave, you can leave. There's nothing stopping you to do that. And all these teams are afraid of bad publicity. They don't want any headaches or issues or whatever the case may be. But if Brooklyn really wanted to be that team, they can force Kevin Durant to play, because we know that Kevin Durant is not going to be Ben Simmons and say, well, I'm just not going to play. I mean, at least I don't see that happening. What do you think, Al?
So that's the problem, is that we're hearing now that he may sit out, even though we know he's a hooper and he wants to play. But let's look at two examples that happened the last year and a half. You got Simmons, as Kieran mentioned, who just chose not to play, right? He made up, or what do you want to call it, this back injury, this mental health situation. We don't want to, again, assume, because we were not there. So if it happened, it happened. We don't know. But from the outside looking in, it looked like he made it up, right? James Harden showed up to camp at least 20 pounds overweight. The dude did not care. He was walking up and down the court, forcing the Rockets to trade him. So maybe to make this more real, to hit our audience a little more, let's play this game. So assume we sign KD instead of the Nets. We hand this kid the franchise. We say, listen, whatever you want. We hire the coach he wants us to hire. The GM he's happy with. He's making all the moves that he wants. He signed DeAndre Jordan, who was his buddy at the time. He wanted James Harden to come to Orlando too. Hey, guess what? We're going to trade 6 first-round picks, whatever it takes. Let's bring Harden here. Now, guess what? All that goes downhill. And all of a sudden now, that KD that we gave all of our money to now wants to leave. So Orlando builds a whole bunch of restaurants in downtown. Orlando hires his coach that really shouldn't have been hired. It's impacting the community. It's impacting the team. It's impacting the job of the GM. It's impacting everyone involved, man. And this is what I think the players don't realize. I get it. Their thinking is that the owners make a ton of money. They can afford it. But what about the employees in the arena? What about the restaurant owner that built the restaurant near the arena because the economy was going to boom? Just like when LeBron left Cleveland multiple times. Downtown boomed when he was there. When he left, it collapsed. So there's a lot that goes into these decisions. And I think, like Kieran said, I don't want to call it too much power, but I do want to call it that it's getting out of control. And the NBA is going to have to step in and say, hey, if you're going to sign a 5-year contract, you got to commit. And if you don't, you want to get traded, there's got to be a repercussion to those players. What that is, we don't know. But it cannot be committed money, guaranteed money. And whether you play or not, you get it. And whether you want to be on, load management or not, you still get paid the same. Like Kyrie Irving, this dude has not played more than 60 games in years. This year, there's rumors saying that he didn't want to, in his contract, he wanted a clause where he was not going to play more than 60 games. I'm like, what is this? Like, it's insane what's happening these days. So with that being said, that's what
he had that in his contract.
He wanted to add it in his contract.
He wanted to have that he won't play more than 60 games.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, I remember the year before he had the whole, during the COVID season, he literally just took a break, just to take a break.
Yep.
He didn't even show up. So
I think he called it.
I'm not surprised at it being Kyrie.
Yeah, I think he called it inhuman, the fact that he has to play more than 60 games. I'm like, bro, like in 1 year, you're making way more than probably the three of us combined are going to make in the next 30 years.
Yeah.
And that's what players don't realize. Like they have this position in life where they are making, insane family, transitional money for the whole life. And all of a sudden it's like, hey, we don't want to play basketball. Well, that wouldn't be possible if you don't play basketball. So it's like, I don't know. I think there's rumors going on around the NBA saying this next CBA agreement, there's going to be some changes to how things are done in free agency and contracts. So we'll see what happens. But all I will say is if you put it, not Brooklyn, but think about the Magic being involved in all this with Simmons, with KD, how would we feel as fans? Like all of a sudden we give up our entire franchise to sign this dude and his friends, but now we're going to suck for the next 8 years as a result without winning anything, because that's the
Yeah,
Nets right now. They're not
yeah.
winning
I
anything.
don't, I
I
don't
thought
feel
of
that.
a good like analogy to put it. Like Dwight Howard already gets a ton of flack in Orlando because he shipped out Van Gundy. You know, he was kind of one of the big reasons why that whole core was a downfall. You know, but imagine if Dwight handpicked Van Gundy, Dwight handpicked his teammates, and then he did that and shipped out Van Gundy and did all that. He would not show his face in Orlando. He would not even think of it. We would crucify him. Like I don't blame Brooklyn if they don't ever want to hear about Kevin Durant again, because like this is unheard of stuff to literally get everything you wanted handed to you on a silver platter, and it doesn't work out, and you want to blame other people, and you want out, and you don't want to clean up your mess. It's like Al said, like they need to start. Someone needs to start taking responsibility at some point, because otherwise these guys are going to get paid, millions and millions, like generational wealth to provide for their family, hundreds of years on, and they're just sitting around doing nothing because they don't want to be there. It's crazy to think about, but it's real. So I hope that, like we said, the CBA agreement for next year, that they kind of go deeper into that they can explore, like, hey, we need to control this, because it's getting to a point where players can really just free reign. These people are paying, hard-earned money to go watch you play basketball, and you're sitting out just because you don't want to, so they have to watch like Joe Harris, drop 20. Like, no one wants to see that. So
here's my thing about Brooklyn. Brooklyn, they may be financially invested, but they're not time invested. I feel like for us, it was a lot harder with Dwight Howard because we drafted him, we molded him, we went to the finals with him. So when he said, I no longer want to be a part of this team, I want to be traded, that would hurt a franchise. But with Brooklyn, they're in a good spot. All right. If I'm them, I would trade Kevin Durant in a heartbeat. Start fresh. Start a rebuild. Go ahead and trade Kyrie. Trade the both of them. Keep Steve Nash. I think Steve Nash was he's way over his head, because first time coach, yeah, he's one of the best point guards to ever play in the NBA. I get that, but at the same time, I don't think he was really ready for the personalities of Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. You can call it a perfect storm with COVID and whatnot, but it's just not. It's not good. But if you can really get back at, you see what the Jazz are trying to get for Donovan Mitchell. You see what they got for Gobert. Imagine what you're going to get for Kevin Durant. And this is literally like, how much longer does Kevin Durant really have? But you still have a lot of value there where you can get a lot back, and somebody is going to pay that. And I just think that if you're going to do that, because he's going to get traded, he's not going to finish his contract. It's going to happen. But now is the perfect time to kind of reset completely, build around a player like Ben Simmons, see what you have there, and then kind of go from there. Now is the perfect time to do it.
It's just it's kind of painful, right? When you think about, like you said earlier, everything they've done in the past, Darren Williams, Joe Johnson, KG, Pope Pierce, all that crap. And then you finally think you got it done, right? You got Kyrie, you got KD. And what do you got to show for it? A few wins in the playoffs in like, 3-4 years. It's a tough pill to swallow. And again, there's really no need for it. They got a good team. They have a chance to win this season. What happened with KD? Nobody knows. But the impact that it's having, I mean, we know very well what the impact is of all this, right? So you had Dwight, and we're still here 12, 13 years later, suffering the impact of Dwight wanting out. So it's rough. It can set your team back years and years. And as a fan base, it's tough, man, because these guys, again, they're getting paid what they want. They're getting what they're treated like the king of the city when they're in town and they're living in town, and they still don't want to be here anymore. And again, the impact that it has is drastic on your team. So we'll see what happens with all this. And I think we've talked about it plenty in today's episode, but it's just, let's see how the NBA handles it. Based on what we're hearing, there's changes coming. I'm intrigued to see how that will look.
Absolutely. So enough about the NBA. Let's get into Magic basketball. So the big news that we've heard is that some random Eastern Conference executive, and this was reported by Heavy.com, but some random NBA Eastern Conference executive says that the Magic could pursue Jordan Poole in free agency. Now, the really big thing to remember is that Jordan Poole is not eligible to become a restricted free agent until next season, which means first we got to find out. A lot of things need to happen before this can even be possible. The first thing we need to find out is whether or not the Golden State Warriors will even offer him a contract sheet, which we pretty confident that they will. Then Jordan Poole will have the decision whether or not he would either want to sign with Golden State or test his luck in free agency, in which then the Orlando Magic or any other team could offer him a contract. And then we have to wait and see whether or not Golden State will then make the decision to either match the contract or let him walk. With that being said, first and foremost, is it too early for us to even be thinking about Jordan Poole? And if it's not too early, do you like the move? Do you like the fit? Can you see a player like Jordan Poole fitting with the players that we have? Kieran?
Yeah, I think it's like the perfect fit. Just because, I mean, you know how much this team loves its Michigan guys. I think instantly that would click a lot. He knows like the type of basketball, the brand that they play. So I think he'd fit in with the team first and foremost. And it's been a long time since the Magic have had like a scoring guard, a combo guard that can sort of just put the ball in the bucket when you need him to. Given the keys, sort of like offensively. Obviously, you want Paolo to be very involved. You want Franz to be very involved, but I do think he's that combo wing scorer that we've been missing for a long time. I wouldn't say it's unrealistic to start wanting to think about that now, simply because of how deep into trouble the Warriors are with the tax, how willing they are to keep that core together. You know, like how they're just so drastically stuck with, you know, the Steph, Clay, Draymond team. I doubt that they'd switch that up over Jordan Poole, especially since Poole is still younger. I wouldn't say he doesn't fit their timeline. Obviously, he just helped them win a ring, but it's more of a question of, are they willing to pay that? And we are, I think, on track to have $60 million in cap if we let off our qualifying offers, if we let them go. So we'll have enough money to give them a bag and then some. So I doubt that money's going to be an issue for the Magic. I think it's their time to make a splash in free agency. So if obviously he has a course of the season, you know, we never know. Last season might be like, I'm not saying it's a fluke, but it might be sort of the outlier of his career. Maybe that's the case. So if he ends up being a little worse this year, I would reconsider. But if he's still that same guy, that same, you know, 22, 24 points a game on a very good team, and you see it by playoff time that he's still that guy, then I'd say I don't have a problem with giving him around, you know, 25, 30 mil. I wouldn't have an issue with that.
I think the biggest thing there is this kid is 23 years old, right? So age fits a timeline with the Magic. To answer your question, Ant, the issue with Poole and the Warriors is, like Kieran mentioned, the tax. They're paying so much money to keep this team together, which you got to respect, right? Like their owners putting the wallet out and saying, we're going to pay to win. We're going to keep our guys. Now it's getting to a point where it's getting serious. Like if you're going to keep Poole at a decent contract, which he deserves, you're going to pay even more tax, which is getting, again, out of control as it is. So they're going to have to make some decisions. One big rumor we're hearing is Draymond Green. He wants to get a max contract. Do the Warriors pay him that? If they don't, which I wouldn't think they want to upset Steph and Clay, so they'll make that work some way, somehow. But somebody's going to suffer. And I think that could be Poole at that point. So a scenario that has thrown my mind is you throw the bag at him next year. The Warriors realize, hey, maybe we don't want to match that contract. It's too heavy for us. You do a sign and trade at that point. Heck, would they want maybe a guy like Mo Bamba? Do they want a guy in Chuma Okeke? Do they want a package of young guys? Whatever it may be, that discussion can be had. But what I like about him is that he's young. He's a pure scorer in this league. He's done it in the regular season. And to your point, Kieran, if he had only done it in the regular season, I may believe it's a fluke. But this kid did it in the NBA Finals in Boston in Game 6. This dude was hitting threes left and right with confidence. So if you tell me that next year you have a chance to drop a lineup of Jordan Poole, Franz, Paolo, and Wendell Carter with any point guard, whether it's Cole, Suggs, or Markelle out there, that's a really, really fun team. And still got flexibility to do more down the road. So if you ask me, I don't know what the hesitation might be. Some people want to go ahead and trade for Donovan Mitchell. Well, guess what? That's going to cost you some young guys and a ton of picks. this won't cost you anything. This costs you what you've been prepping for all along, which is having flexibility. It's going to cost you money, which we have plenty of. And to your final point, Kieran, this kid went to Michigan. We know how we feel about that. So I don't know. I hope that where there's smoke, there's some fire behind it, because this kid would fit in nicely in Orlando.
Yeah, so I view Jordan Poole as it's a double-edged sword, right? Some people view him, and you just don't know if him realistically being what the fourth option behind Wiggins, Steph, and Clay, if he's more of a system player because the Warriors have a good system, or he's a player that is waiting to break out. This might be a really bad analogy, but Tracy McGrady was ready to leave the Raptors because he didn't want to play underneath, Vince Carter. He didn't want to be in that shadow, and he wanted to be able to have his own team. This allows, the reason why I think Poole would do it is because this gives him that opportunity. If he's going day in and day out, battling against Steph and Clay on a daily basis in practice, and playing with them in the game, won a championship, you look at all these different factors and dynamics, and you can say, man, you bring a player that not only has been side and side playing with one of the best players ever playing in the NBA, has championship pedigree, it can be in the locker room and talk to these guys where literally nobody on the team, not even the head coach, can really talk to what it takes to win the championship. That brings a different dynamic. Then the question would be, how much are you really willing to pay? And this is my view on it. The Orlando Magic, we know we're not a free agent destination. As much as we want to brag about Sunshine State and no state taxes and the weather is great, I'm sorry, we know that that's not enough. We're not Miami. We're not the Lakers. We're not any of these other teams. So that the Magic, we're going to have to spend. We're going to have to spend more than the average team would spend. It's just the way that it is. First person that comes to mind is Rashard Lewis. So we haven't really signed a big time free agent in a very, very, very long time. So eventually the Magic are going to have to spend. Question is, do they want to do that now? Are they willing to throw everything that they have, their future, on a Jordan Poole who could fizzle out? We don't know. We don't know how he's going to be able to operate under what would be his own team and what you're hoping for. But in my opinion, I think that's worth the risk, because we talked about Donovan Mitchell, and Stephen A. Smith is over here talking about how the Jazz are asking for RJ Barrett and 6 first-round picks for Donovan Mitchell to trade him to the Knicks. Who's doing that? And I get that we already have a lot of young players and we have a lot of draft picks. I get it. At the same time, it's kind of, what's really worth more? What do you value more? And I think that right now, we're lucky that this is a decision down the road, because I'm expecting big things from our guards. I'm expecting improvements from Cole Anthony and Jalen Suggs. Jalen Suggs barely played 40 games last season. We're seeing that he's already playing. He's already going through some runs. He's having a good offseason. Cole Anthony, we've seen the videos and we've seen moving pictures, kind of documenting everything he's done this offseason, and we see him putting the work in. And if we see this season that these guards are really improving and playing better than what we thought, then somebody like Poole doesn't make sense, because now that you're investing in the guards that you have. But if we get the same production that we got last year, then it's kind of like, all right, do we keep waiting or do we make a move? And I think that that's really going to be the biggest decision that the front office will have to make, because the 2 guard is where we're kind of not 100% sure on. There's different options there.
Yeah, I was talking to Al about it earlier, like how there's so much uncertainty of one season before the next. Because last season there were players that we were thinking of, like, that people would say, oh, I think he's going to be a long-term starter. He's going to be our best player on the team. And then by the year after, he's having his roster spot in question, or by the year after, he's already cut. Like, the guys can fizzle out by like just a matter of a few months. So like the league is very unforgiving when it comes to that. And guys can also improve like crazy in a season. So you can't really base a judgment like this a year ahead, because obviously, Cole and Suggs could have these massive improvements next season, and we're like, okay, our backcourt is set for the future. We don't need to worry about no Jordan Poole. But we could also have an issue where Jordan Poole, he starts averaging like 15 points a game. He's not really that guy anymore, and then it's no longer in the question. So obviously this is a topic that is a little premature, but I do think it's interesting to think about a team that has Markelle Fultz, Jordan Poole, Franz Wagner, Paolo, and Wendell, because that legitimately to me is a playoff team. Like by next season, by the season after this season, that's a good 6 seed, 5 seed, possibly, because that's a very talented team. But yeah, obviously there's a lot of things that factor into it, and I think the biggest thing is that time will tell. We'll just have to figure out by waiting.
Yeah, I did want to say quickly. So the Warriors this season are scheduled to pay $350 million in salaries and taxes. That's only going to get worse if they re-sign Jordan Poole. What that will look like if they give him the max, it's around 5 years, $185 million. So again, in my mind, that doesn't seem realistic at all for them to do, unless again they make some significant decisions with their roster. Now, if Poole comes to the Magic, according to Sporttrack.com, the middle ground in a contract for him might be 4 years, about $101 million. So let me ask you guys this: would you pay that contract to Jordan Poole if you were the GM of the Magic next offseason?
Yeah, comfortably.
I took a look at the free agent class, and I can't think of the names right now off the jump, but from what I remember, it wasn't an exciting free agent class, or not anyone realistic that we'll be able to add to the team. Eventually, the Magic are going to have to spend money. You either spend that on free agency or you spend it on the players that you have. And I think that if there's one thing the Magic have been consistently good at, is that they've been savvy financially. And I think that realistically, I don't know. I can't see the Magic really spending that much on Jordan Poole, because it would just be out of character. Do they really value him that much? Do they think that he would be able to change a team that much, to be able to spend that much money? Granted, that sounds like more or less the same contract that we gave Nikola, but Nikola was also an all-star. Jordan Poole is not. So I'm curious to see. So this would just be one of those situations where it's something to keep an eye on. We know that nothing can happen right now, but I would keep an eye throughout the season on Jordan Poole. I would also keep an eye on Cole Anthony, Jalen Suggs, and RJ Hampton to kind of see where that development is. Because again, at the same time, towards the end of the season, if we see Jalen Suggs being who we thought Jalen Suggs is supposed to be, then Jordan Poole doesn't make sense. So I may or may not give the contract, just depending on the type of season. If Jordan Poole can have another really good season, then how can you not give him a contract, or at least try? I would be offended if the Orlando Magic didn't try to get him. We didn't offer anything. I'd be extremely offended, because then it shows that we're not being aggressive.
Yeah, they should at least fly him in, give him the whole pep talk, sweeten the deal, like at least do something.
Give him a tour around the practice facility.
Yep.
The multi-million-dollar whatever that we have, you do it all, because at the very least, that's what we're supposed to do. But at the same time, I also think that the Magic do have to make noise this season. And we've been reading kind of the last couple of days on where people realistically think the Orlando Magic will end up. A lot of things that we've been reading, the media outlets are saying that, the Magic are going to be improving, but we're not really going to see it, on the record side. I think that for free agents to want to come here and make a difference and maybe not try to squeeze a Magic out of every penny and dollar, they need to be able to show that, we're trending in the right direction and we're getting wins.
Yep.
Yeah, which I think we are there, right? We're there. It's just a matter of now seeing it happen on the court.
Yeah, I think the schedule plays a big part in it, because I think it's funny how, before the schedule released, everyone was like, oh, the Magic should be gunning for 40. We should be going for 35, 32, somewhere around there. Or some of them are saying 45. And I'm like, all right. And then the schedule releases, and you start to actually take a look. Your mind refreshes and realize, oh, these are NBA teams. They have this player now. And you start to realize, wow, this is going to be a little tougher than we thought it was. And people's expectations kind of get tempered. So I personally, if I'm going to try to make a realistic prediction, I don't know if 35 is actually realistic. I think 35 is best case scenario. I'd say 30 is pretty likely, but again, the way that the draft class is looking next year too, the tough road stretches that we've got, I would not be surprised. I'm not saying I want them to. I would not be surprised if they go for another Tankathon special, just because it's very very top heavy on that draft.
What would be, Karen, real quick, just to kind of add to that, what would you say would need to be the starting lineup for you to say, man, the Magic are really trying to not tank, but to really push and try to make it into a play-in playoff spot?
I think right now, if you take each player at how good they are at this moment, or at least how good I think they are at this moment, you start Markelle Fultz, Cole Anthony, Franz Wagner, Paolo, and Wendell. Just because, and the reason I put Cole over Suggs is I think just the rocky start he had, that was kind of expected. And then you go on the bench and you have defensive players like Jonathan Isaac and Jalen Suggs, who you can rotate pretty evenly, especially late in the fourth quarter during crunch time when you need those defensive reps. There's a lot of ways to kind of mix around the rotation, but I do think that would be our starting lineup if we really wanted to push for a win. Just because I think we're gonna see some improvements in Cole Anthony. I think he's been putting a ton of work this offseason, so I'm definitely looking forward to seeing year 3 Cole. But yeah, I think that's probably our best available roster right now. Our best 5-man lineup would be that.
I don't know, man. I got a feeling that Cole is definitely going to come off the bench. I don't want him to, but if I was to make a prediction right now, I see it's Markelle, Gary, Franz, Paolo and Wendell.
Well, Gary.
So Gary Harris, huh?
I see Gary Harris just because it's already a young roster. He brings his you're putting a veteran in there that can really support Markelle Fultz. And I think this is my logic behind it, is really giving Cole Anthony the minutes in the point guard position with the second unit. And I think that would even help out that much more with getting Jonathan Isaac back in as well. That's where I would put my money.
Let's see. I mean, if you're trying to win, makes sense. Gary Harris in the starting lineup. He's probably the best two-way player that we have right now, whether it's defense and shooting. It's a veteran presence, adds balance to the lineup. So if you're really trying to win, that's how you would do it, honestly. If you're trying to develop, however, then you give the minutes to Cole Anthony, Jalen Suggs. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting to see how training camp kind of plays out and how the rotation looked like when preseason starts. So early on, kind of what's mostly trying to do in preseason. That's going to dictate a lot of what happens in the regular season.
Yeah. Now, keep in mind, who I want and who I think to start are two completely different things.
Yeah.
If it was me, I want Jalen Suggs to have that second spot, but that's only if the shooting is where it needs to be.
I agree. Like it's completely different when you like what you want, just as a fan, who you want to start and what is actually going to happen. Because I know a lot of people last year when they saw like Franz was starting after the summer league and preseason he had, people were pissed. They were like, Franz is starting over guys like Chuma and stuff, and obviously he proved everyone wrong. So you kind of can't really get a good gauge on what the team can be as a cohesive unit of 5 until they're actually out there on the floor. So I like you said, Anthony, I wouldn't be surprised if Gary's out there because he does provide a lot of much needed shooting to the team that you don't get out of Jalen Suggs. So having Gary out there with his veteran presence, that definitely would help Markelle get his playmaking reps off. I think it'd be a smart decision if they're looking to win right now. But it really depends on the context of what Coach Mose wants for the team.
Yeah, and then a lot of that, and as you mentioned earlier, Kieran, a lot of that has to do with our schedule. So the NBA did release the schedules for all the teams, and we're kind of able to see exactly how things are going to start off for the Orlando Magic. And 6 of the first 8 games are on the road, followed by 7 games at home. But what are your thoughts so far, looking at the schedule? How you think it looks for the Orlando Magic? Does it help at all? Does it make it easier for our run to the play-in? What are your thoughts on the schedule?
Oh, Al, you can go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that first, 6 out of 8 on the road, it's going to test the team a little bit, right? But the good thing for me personally is it's going to get these guys to get that chemistry going even more. You're going to be on the road, getting to know different cities, having dinner together. It gets that chemistry going early on in the season. And then after that, you come home for 7 games straight, although there's some tough games in there. The Warriors being one of them, you get to come home and kind of just say, put it all together. Hey, we got training camp down. We got some games on the road. Let's play the 7 games at home and hopefully go on a stretch. The bad thing is the month of middle of November to like middle of December is going to be brutal for the Magic. I think we play only 2 teams that are not playoff teams in that stretch. So it's going to be really, really tough for the Orlando Magic right after that. So the first 30 or so games are going to be a test. You got to survive that. If some way, somehow you manage to win, 12, 13 games out of those first 30, which would mean almost 500 basketball, that would be really impressive for the Magic early on in the season. Quickly also breaking it down a little further, the schedule. So games on national TV, that was a big topic for all of us. How many are we going to get? So the Magic only got 1 game on what you would consider national TV. That would be TNT. That's going to be November 1st at OKC. We did also get 3 other games on what you would call now NBA TV. You can call it national TV or not, but we do have 3 of those. 2 against the Knicks, one against the Suns. The Magic will have 13 sets of back-to-back games this season, so not horrible. We've seen worse in the past. And like we said earlier, their longest home stretch of the season is going to be 7 games right at the start of the season. Some key dates to consider. Our good friend Clifford returns October 28th to Orlando as a head coach of the Hornets. That's going to be interesting. Chet against Paulo gets national TV exposure. We got that on November 1st. Of course, we also have Jabari Smith against Paulo on November 7th. So same week, we get to see the top 2 rookies there go against Paulo. And then the Magic will be home for Christmas and New Year's. That's always helpful. They're going to be around their families and stuff, things like that. So what about you, Kieran? You wrote an article for us on the site today, OrlandoMagicHQ.com. You kind of broke it down a little bit further. What are your thoughts on the schedule? Does it help the Magic? Does it not? Go for it.
It's really tough to tell because it's very hot and cold. Like you said, there's that nice little 7-game home stretch, like right out the gates, like literally 2 weeks into the season. And then after that, you're playing strictly playoff teams for almost a whole month and a few back-to-backs in there. Just moving cities back and forth. It's a lot of real competition you got to face. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's going to cause us to tank, but it's going to be a very tough challenge for this young team to kind of put the pieces together, overcome these obstacles. Because again, that's going to be really difficult to kind of just get thrown in the wolves out there before you're even near the All-Star break. But there's also a lot to talk about when it comes to healthy teams that are coming back healthy, like in the West. People were always saying, last season how the East was really dominant. East is looking better. East is back on the map. But I did write in the article about how that's probably only a 1-season thing for now, because as it was pretty obvious, the Clippers are a very good team. They even made the Western Conference Finals without Kawhi. And they've only gotten better. They've got a deep bench. They add Kawhi back this year. The Nuggets are adding Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. this year. Zion's going back to the Pelicans. So there's some real firepower back in the West. That was probably one of the main reasons why those play-in spots in the East last season were so competitive and so tight, just because there was so much firepower in the East compared to the West. But now that those teams are healthy, they're going to take the wins away from the East, and we're going to start to see a little bit more of a balance between Eastern teams instead of Western teams. Instead of it being top heavy, you only have like Memphis and Phoenix and Golden State were the only hard hitters over in the West. So I do think it's going to be slightly easier winning record wise to make a playing spot in the East, but I also don't think it's going to be as simple as just, the Magic should just go all in and try to win right now. Just because our individual schedule, us as a team, it looks like from the other seasons we've had where we look like we're getting screwed in certain situations, whether it be time related, geographically. There's a lot of factors that can really affect this team. So I think I'm not gonna say it's a good thing for this team. I think it's a challenge, but like we said earlier, it's an evaluation year. You're not really right away looking to tank. You're not looking at Victor Wembanyama with your eyes all glowing and stuff. You don't want to look at that. You don't want to start out with that mentality. But if it comes to that, and you really have to, I wouldn't be surprised if they did. You just don't have the pieces right now to be a winning playoff team, and that's okay. You need to take time to get there. But yeah, it's all just going to depend on the course of the season. Throughout the stretches, those home stretches, those road stretches, we're going to see what this team is really made of.
Yeah, and let's say the Orlando Magic don't make the play-in. As long as they're fighting to get into it, I consider that a very successful season, even if we don't make the play-in, because Magic only won 22 games last season, and we've already went through the numbers in previous episodes of how many games they would need to win if we're going based on last year's record to be able to make it into the play-in, and it's a pretty wide jump. And, could the Magic do that? They could. They can surprise people. We saw Cleveland do it. But it's very also unlikely. But we like everything that we're seeing. We're understanding that players weren't as healthy, and we're getting a healthy team back, and we're hoping that these rookies and these sophomores that going into the season, we are hoping to see that development. And I think that with these national, not considered fully national with the NBA TV games, but we're hoping that the exposure is there as well. I love the fact that if we're only going to get one national televised game, I like the fact that it's against Chet Holmgren and OKC. I think that's exciting, and I think that a lot of people are going to watch that game because we were kind of robbed from that in the summer league, and we were also robbed from that in the crossover. And this gives everyone the opportunity to be able to see it on TNT. It's going to be the game that people are talking about. I look at the Knicks game, and I really think that's more of a Greg Anthony nod. If you're really, really looking, it's on NBA TV. It's against New York. There's a high likelihood that Greg Anthony is going to be the analyst for both of those games. So I guess if you're going to, like, I'm looking at it, I'm like, why is it that they gave us 2 NBA TV games against the Knicks? Like, why? I guess that kind of makes sense. And I think the game against the Suns, I think that was just a random selection. I'm not sure why. Like, that to me doesn't.
It was probably
doesn't
just
make a
for
lot
the
of sense.
Suns. It probably didn't have to do with us.
Yeah, exactly.
True.
Exactly. But I think for the most part, it's at least going to be exciting. I wish and I'm sure that the schedule was made before it all happened. But it would have been nice to have one of those NBA TV games against Atlanta. Yeah. I mean, with that being said, I mean, we're looking at, the Jabari versus Paolo November 7th. You had to mention already. We already mentioned Chet and Paolo. We're talking about Clifford coming back. I mean, what game excites you the most?
I mean, for me personally, you know what I'm going to say, right? So you got Steph coming early in the season to Orlando for the first time in years. Every time they've come to Orlando, it's always in February, March. Usually the team is injured by then, whether it's Green or Clay or Steph. So I'm actually looking forward to that game, seeing what the Warriors look like this season. Of course, NBA champs. Arena's going to be, yeah, there you go, future Magic, Jordan Poole. The arena's always packed, for that game. It's excitement. But most importantly, the Magic, for some reason, always play well against the Warriors at home. I think we've beaten them the last 2 years at home. So I think, imagine now having, Paolo, all these young guys healthy, hopefully by then also, and we end up beating them as the NBA champs. I think that's going to be a boost in confidence. So that's a game that I have circled on my calendar, not only because Steph's coming to Orlando, but also because if we can some way, somehow win that game, it's going to be a huge boost to us. That's the start of a 7-game homestand too. So if you win that game, you can potentially win 3, 4, 5 in that stretch.
And then recently in the Orlando Sentinel article, and I want to touch base on this really quick, Markelle Fultz had this to say: I am honestly the most excited I've ever been. This is a summer I can really focus on my summer and enjoy the process. When we talk about Markelle Fultz, we know at the end of the season, we got to see him back on the court, back in Orlando Magic uniform. He was on minute restrictions, barely playing no more than, as soon as he hit that 20-minute mark, he was coming out of the game. But we saw a lot of really good flashes. Do you consider this season being the most important season for Markelle Fultz and the Magic?
Yeah, I think for not even just for his spot on like as a starter, I think just for his career, this is his time to sort of prove everybody wrong, to show why this process was so important to him, why being a part of the Magic was important to him, because he spent a lot of time under scrutiny. Number one pick, didn't perform to what everyone expected, and then once he's playing pretty well for Orlando, he gets injured, he goes down for a year. He comes back, he plays pretty well, but he's on a minute restriction, so it's not getting all that much attention. So we get to kind of see it in full display and on for an entire season instead of just a couple months. So this is pretty a pretty big game changer for just Markelle as a person. I'm really excited to see what he can bring to the table to really solidify himself as the point guard of the future.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I think not only, with his spot with the Magic, but also again in the NBA in general. But most importantly, really is what are the Magic going to do going forward at that point guard position? Again, we talked about it before. Cole, Suggs, Markelle. If it comes in, and God forbid, we don't want to see this, we are, adamant about not wanting to see this. But if he does get hurt again for any reason, and then you got Cole that comes out and balls out like he did last year early in the season, it's going to be hard to sit down Cole Anthony after that. No matter what happens with Markelle, you got to keep him in the starting lineup. Like you said, Anthony, earlier, what if Jalen Suggs puts it together and plays like the fourth pick of the draft that we thought he was going to be, or fifth pick in the draft last year that we thought he was going to be, and it starts balling out? And yeah, Markelle's not there to defend his case or to add contribution to the team what we expect him to. So I think it's going to be important for him, but most importantly, again, it's the health factor. He's got to be healthy. He's got to play at least 70 games this year. Be out there, 25, 30 minutes a night, and lead to wins. Lead this team, scoring once in a while, push the pace, organize the offense. If he can do that, he's a starting point guard in this team at least next year also. But if he cannot do that, it's going to be rough for us to continue to defend him and wanting to be the starting lineup. And also, again, some of those young guys right behind him might simply outplay him and take his spot.
Absolutely. This time is going by slow and fast at the same time. August is almost over. We got media day on September 26th, training camp starting on the 27th of September. So before you know it, we're going to be already there. And a lot of these questions that we have, we're going to finally start to get some of the answers for them. Other than that, man, really good episode. If you aren't already following Kieran, make sure to do so on his Twitter at KP20Magic. A lot of his takes I agree with, so he's definitely one of my favorite follows. So I appreciate you, Kieran, for just saying a lot of things I agree with. It makes my life a little bit easier. And then also make sure to check out OrlandoMagicHQ.com for his articles. On that note, it's a wrap. Kieran, appreciate you joining us, and we'll catch you guys next week.
Thank you for listening to the OZone Podcast, the voice of Magic fans. For all the latest Orlando Magic news and updates, follow us on Twitter at the OZone Pod and on Instagram at Orlando Magic HQ. Remember to subscribe and leave a 5-star review on all your favorite podcast listening platforms.